Good morning, good morning. How is everyone's day going? Today we're going to be doing a live watercolor class, and specifically we're going to be doing abstract paintings. These are super fun to do and super low pressure, so we're going to be learning a bunch of different techniques by exploring through abstract. Super low pressure, they don't need to be perfect, we just get to kind of play today. While we're getting kind of set up, because for this, I recommend setting up a bunch of different pieces. I've cut out some 4x5s and 5x7s. Hi, Sunny. And I'll probably be working on like 4 or 5 at any time, because some of these we're going to want to layer and let dry in between, so we can do a whole bunch of different fun stuff. I've got my sketchbook, and I'm also going to be taping down a couple pieces just to kind of be able to switch in between. While we're waiting, does anybody have any preferences on color palettes that we're going to do today? Or also, what palette do you want me to use to demonstrate on? I've got quite a few. I've got the Culture Hustle one. I've got my palette. I've got the Viviva ones. Winsor Newton. I also have Core Sennelier. I can never pronounce that right. And a bunch of other ones. I might actually have whatever palette you suggest. Welcome, welcome. I'm glad that you're not late. I'm glad you're here. This is, I don't know if this is the first lesson. We do this every Saturday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Let me actually take, I need another one of my little boards. Blues and purples, muted purples, or muted ones purples. Let me write some of these down so I don't forget. Purple and blues, muted ones purples. Ooh, what are my favorites? You mean colors or palettes? Just as an FYI, I probably won't have a great answer to either of those because it really depends. I like a ton of different things for a lot of different reasons. No, you don't. You absolutely do not need to have another lesson under your belt in order to understand. This is a play session, and all of my classes, I try to treat them, I mean, we do progress a little bit, but in general, they're meant to be so that anybody can jump in at any point and just follow along and take some space and do kind of whatever they want. So I use watercolor, mainly on TikTok. You see a lot of my stuff with watercolor. Personally, in my own practice, I also do acrylic painting, and then I do a bunch of other stuff like metal smithing and pretty much any sort of crafting stuff. I just like to work with my hands. I like to make things. That's my favorite. But yeah, today we're going to be painting with watercolor. So if you're joining and you want to paint along with us, we're going to be doing abstract watercolor, which is going to allow us to play with our supplies, which is one of the best ways to actually learn because it's low pressure. We're going to learn about some techniques, and we're going to just have some fun. These don't need to turn out perfect because abstract is kind of how you want it to be. And I'm just getting some prepped because we're going to work on a bunch of them at any one time. And yeah, so you might want to get a couple things out, maybe cut some pieces down. I like to I partially work on smaller ones because I find some of the techniques easier in smaller ones, especially I recommend that for beginners. Work a little bit smaller, not like too small, but a little bit smaller is going to give you a better chance of success on some techniques. And then also it's going to allow us to do a bunch of different things at once, and it also allows me to be able to show it all in one thing. Yeah, so go grab your supplies. I've got requests for today's color palettes being blues, purples, and muted colors. And I do have a request for the Viviva ones. I'll demonstrate on a couple different palettes so that we can actually play with a little bit more. I forgot one thing. I need to go get another color mixing well. All right. I've got my favorite little well here. This is just from Michael's, and it's just a muffin tin mixing well. I love these things. As you can clearly see by my very stained well. Your paper is 6x9? That's totally fine. That'll work just fine, because these are about 6x9 here. So this is a 5x7. That one's about a 6x9. Your watercolor paper buckles. Yeah, most watercolor paper will buckle at least a little bit. If you're working with like a 300 pound, it's not going to necessarily. Cardstock will have the same effect, and it will also be a little harder to work with. Okay, I've got my things kind of set up here. Next thing we need to do is, you guys can choose the first few we're going to work on today. So I've got a bunch of different options. Let's take a second. So if you're away from the phone right now, you might want to come back for just a minute so we can kind of decide what we're going to do. All right, so first option is these kind of fun donut rings. This is an idea kind of inspired by that similar idea where people turn little blobs into mushrooms and things like that. So we could do donuts instead. This is kind of a fun exercise in learning how water bleeds together at different dryness levels. This one's dry brushing. This one is just a combination of different things. We can also take something that's kind of real but a little more abstracted and work on some different details. We can be inspired by kind of microscope type things. We can also, hold on, let me look through my little examples over here. Just work real wet on wet. We can do some layering, kind of like a plaid type pattern. We can do some other types of layering, but also play with things like watercolor blooms. All right, you said 3 and 5, but I do not remember what what I've been saying as far as the numbers. So maybe give me a little description, or maybe I can put some numbers up. We can also do something kind of fun where we take just some abstracted colors and then later we turn them in. All right, so the blooms, the donuts, and then I'm thinking this might be the DNA type strand one. And the layering. Okay, let's kind of get started. We'll be able to do a bunch more too, but these are the ones we're going to get started with. So let me move this one over. Yeah, if you have specific requests, let me know. I'm happy to. I need to come up with a better way for you guys to actually tell me what I'm asking, because obviously that's a little unclear. Mixed media paper. I mean, work with whatever you have. If you don't have watercolor paper, it's totally fine. There's just going to be a couple different things. One of the unique things about the way that watercolor paper works, or at least it seems to me, is that the fibers are a little bit more open, so it soaks in and spreads a little bit more. whereas something like a mixed media paper is going to be a hot press where they actually like almost iron the paper, which is going to close all those layers up and make them a lot more smooth. And it's going to instantly sink, and it's not really going to spread as much. So you're going to get some different effects. That doesn't mean they're not going to be beautiful. It just means they're going to be a little different. Okay. So let's take a look at some of these and see what ones we need to do first. So we're going to start with, let's start with the layering one, because we're actually going to need to make sure that when we're layering these, that we let these dry. So we're going to start with that, and we're going to mix up with a nice blue. Let's start with blues. I don't have any mixed media paper because I mainly work on paper with watercolor. So I typically have the watercolor paper. I do have some like hot press. I don't particularly like it personally, but that's my personal preference. So okay, so we've got our layering one here, and you could do this with, I primarily paint with this size 12 round brush, and but I might also demonstrate this using a slightly different brush. You could definitely do this with this one too, but this would also be, if you have a flat brush, this would be a good application for that. So to answer the question about will I post this to YouTube, probably not. And that's not because I don't want to. The last 4 lives I've done, TikTok hasn't saved them. There's been some sort of, it just says there's been a technical error and this was not saved. So unfortunately, I mean, if by somehow it miraculously has restored its ability to save these, then yes, I will post it. But I'm just going to start by saying probably not, because, well, that's TikTok. So I can't change their technical error, unfortunately. Okay. For this one, I am going to try to find, let me look around here to see if I've got a flat brush somewhere. Sure, I'll use this one. This is obviously actually an acrylic brush that I've used. I typically try to keep my acrylic and watercolor brushes separate, but I end up using these ones that I buy at first for watercolor as acrylic, since I only really use one brush. I'm also going to tape off in here just to give me a nice little square. Sometimes taping off even in your sketchbook will give you kind of a little fun frame, and it'll make it look more polished. Totally not required, but it can be a little fun. So I'm going to do that. And this is just some washi tape. Oh, and I've run out of that roll. So we're going to switch over to a different one. The other thing to notice about this little one that we're going to be painting here is I've also varied the color concentration or saturation level. So I started with 1, and then I slowly diluted the color in each layer from here over. And then in the secondary one, I changed that initial color a little bit to change the kind of color preference. So it says that I have the most up-to-date version of the app, and I'm also hesitant to do anything specific to it because it always gives me those warnings that all my drafts are going to be deleted, and I don't want to lose all of that. But I'll double check it again. I don't know, I've been having some weird, I think they're updating some stuff currently, and when that happens, I notice weird things like not all the comments necessarily come through, and sometimes it's just a little bit odd. I can't imagine the technical issues that come with trying to change over everybody's app with a bunch of different settings. So, okay, so just in case we have anybody brand new to painting with watercolor before, what you're going to need is you're going to need a couple cups of water. You can tell this one's super dirty. I've got another one, and I also have a spray bottle. You could use this or a fresh clean cup with a little pipette in it. We want to have a clean water source in order to mix up colors without using kind of the muddy color that's water that's going to possibly change that. And then you can take whatever palette you have. So you could have a palette like this, or you could even use tube watercolor paints, whatever you have. And I typically do mix up my colors separately, and I actually put them in here, and I like to have more amounts of it than I think I'm going to need just in case. And you can always, once it dries out, reuse it later. So one of the colors that was recommended was a muted blue, or blues and maybe some muted blues. So let's actually start with that, and let's challenge ourselves a little bit. If anybody has the Viviva ones, that's what I'm going to use on this first one. And I'm going to say challenge ourselves a little bit because these are so vibrant that in order to mute it, we're going to have to really do a little bit of color work. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this fresh clean water and I'm going to put it in one of these wells here because I want to mix up a bunch of one color. And then I'm going to take a freshly washed and kind of damp brush. If you're using the Viviva ones, you do need to make sure this is a little bit wet in order to get it. You don't want to necessarily spray on these because it will get real messy. And let's grab, ooh, this one's going to be fun. Let's take some of this Persian blue because it actually lifts an interesting color too. I'm just going to take a damp brush and kind of smear it on here. If you're working with normal wells, that'll be just fine too. And I'm going to place it in here. The other thing that is really helpful to have handy is a little strip of paper, maybe a scrap piece where you can actually test what the color is going to look like because it's going to look a lot different than in the well there. I'm going to get a little bit more of this blue mixed in because I want it to be a little darker to start with. And let's just double check. That's a little bit darker, so that's going to be good. I'm going to wash my brush next. If you're doing this not with the Viviva ones, you want to start with something like this blue is kind of somewhere in between like an ultramarine and a phthalo. Maybe mix those two together to get a color kind of like this. Then if we want to mute this color, what we want to do is actually use the color that's on the opposite side of the color wheel, which is an orangey type color. So let's just start by adding in, I'm actually going to go for the vermilion because it has a little bit more of a red shade to it. So that's what I'm going to use to mute this. And you don't want too much, so just grab just a little bit at a time. We can always add more. Need a little bit more. Wash my brush because I don't want to mix these up. And let's mix that in there. You're going to be able to see a little bit of a difference here. It's going to be a little more muted. We could go a little further if we wanted to, or you could stop it there. I think I'm going to stop it there. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to make horizontal lines, or you could actually start with vertical. Another really good tip, and one that really helped me a lot when I was learning watercolor, is sometimes you're thinking, okay, this is the way it's facing, so I'm going to have to paint like this, and then I'll have to paint like this. Flip your painting as it's comfortable for you. So, for example, I'm going to be painting the vertical stripes first, and it's actually a little more comfortable for me to do this in this direction. So, here's what I'm going to do. Is you could do this with just your round brush and try to get really even lines, or if you want them to be super duper even, something like this flat brush is going to really help you with that. The other thing is use the table to kind of stabilize your arm so you can move in a smoother way. All right, I'm going to start to prep as well because I want to slightly dilute this color a little bit at a time. So I'm going to put a little more water in this well here. And let's start, so we've got our dark color here. Let's start by putting a little bit of that in here. And let's actually start from the lightest to the darkest. We'll just put in 1 to 2 brushfuls. Let's start with 2. And each time that we make one of these strokes that we can go from light to dark to increase the contrast. Yes, so these ones are Viviva color sheets. But this lesson will work with anything that we are going to paint with, or anything you might have. So I'm just going to take this brush, and I'm just going to make a nice line across the page. Okay, we got one. Then I'm going to darken this color a little bit. I'm going to take 2 of these brushfuls, mix it into that water. My next line, I want to keep some distance between so they don't bleed together. So this is a good brush control exercise too. Try to get it close, but don't touch. And then I'm just going to, on every single one of these strokes, I'm going to take about 2 brushfuls of this because it's going to slowly change this to be a darker color as I move down. Now at this point, if you don't like those backgrounds, I don't typically mind them, but if you don't like them, you want to grab that extra water that's sitting there, and that will kind of help prevent those a little bit. Nope, that one was not as close, but that's okay. I had kind of intended on trying to keep these all the same, but oh well. We're just going to lean into it. Ooh, getting real close there. Darken in that color again. And then we'll do another one. Now, if you are using the Viviva ones, one of the reasons why I selected that blue I did is because when it dries, and sometimes there are those back runs, or if you were to lift out some color, it exposes this very slight pink color, and I just love that so much. All the way down the page. Getting a little bit darker as we go down. I wish I had a little more contrast. I think I started it a little bit too dark, but that's okay. Oops. Let's just go in for the darkest one for my final stroke here. And I did have mine touch in at least one area. So we're just going to start with this, and then we need to let this dry, because what we're learning in this one is a little bit of brush control, so trying to make nice smooth strokes that don't touch. And I did an okay job of that. I definitely failed in a few spots. We're going to learn what happens when we leave puddles of water. If you leave them there, you can start to see some of that blooming happening or the back running happening. And then ultimately what we are going to be learning from this one is how to layer. And we do need to let this dry completely before we can do that. So we're going to move on to our next little painting. Yes, if it's been a while since you've painted anything, this might be your sign to grab your supplies. All right, the next one, this one's going to be another layering one, but we're also going to encourage some blooms. So we're going to need to mix up, well, we can actually start with the color that we currently have as our first layer of these little kind of blobby shapes. And I'm going to switch back over to using my preferred brush, which is my round brush. And I'm just going to grab, I've got some other pieces of paper taped down here. These are 5x7s. Any size you want is totally fine for this. And first thing you want to do is keep in mind that we don't want to cover the entire page right away. We want to leave some white space, but other than that, there really aren't any rules. Just grab some of whatever color that you want. I'm going to be starting with this same blue, and I'm just going to make some blobs. Don't overthink it too much. Have some of them run off the page. Have some of them not. I'm going to start with just one blob, because if we want to play around with these back runs, what we actually want to do is, after we apply this, let it soak in for a minute, wash your brush off, gently tap it off. You still want some color in here, and then all you're going to do is just drop that water in once it's kind of absorbed, and that's going to give you these little blooms. So you could texture it with little ones, or you could put a big drop in to make a much bigger bloom. And what's happening is that water is just pushing that pigment to kind of the borders of where it's a little bit drier and a little bit wetter. Okay, I'm going to do that a couple times. I think watercolor blooms and backgrounds are so beautiful, especially in more of this abstract style because it gives a little more texture and it's a little more interesting. The other thing you can do is, like, let's say we have a smaller blob here. Oops. Doesn't need to be perfect, but I do want it to be a little bit more. Is if we wanted this to primarily be an outline, we can kind of start to add water in and push it to the sides while we're kind of lifting some of this up. So if you just kind of wanted to outline the shape with the blue color, by introducing while things are still wet, kind of lifting and moving it around, you can kind of make it so that it pushes to the sides. So yeah, absolutely. You can join at any time. Well, obviously when I'm on, I do most Saturdays, not every single one of them, but most Saturdays at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And I do try to schedule a little event on my page so that you can register for it if it's easier. You can also just start with an outline and then grab some more water and pull it in if you wanted to make a little more difference so that it gets lighter. And then you could also then drop in more of that pigment in there. You've got a couple different options for kind of creating some texture on some of these. I'm going to start with these 3 blobs. Again, we want this to dry in order to allow it to so that we can layer parts on top of each other, because in this one, what we're going to be learning is actually pretty similar to our previous one, where we're also learning about layering, and it's also going to tell us a little bit about what happens when you layer different colors on top of each other. And yeah, on my bio, I typically just have a little thing that says classes Saturdays 11 a.m. Mountain Time, and then it allows me to schedule them. So I schedule them a couple days before if I remember. I want to revisit this one just a little bit to show you a couple things that's happening. One, this part's dry here, but this part over here is not dry yet. So if I tried to start doing some of those strokes, I would get nice delineation in this dry area here, but it would all bleed together over here. So I want to wait. Yes, so I have one here. It doesn't really show the color layering necessarily because I use basically the same color, but you can kind of see some of it. So we need to wait on this one again too. And that means that on this one, we're going to mix up some other colors, and I'm going to use a different palette for this just to show you something else. Oh, I'm so glad that you're taking space to learn. It is an intimidating medium because it's so unpredictable, but it's so fun if you can kind of just let go and let yourself paint. So for this one, I'm actually going to switch over to, would you guys rather me use Culture Hustle, my palette, Winsor Newton? I also have a little bit of Daniel Smith paint if you wanted to see that. What do you guys want to see for this one? Did not put my water bottle lid on and just spilled water all over myself taking a drink. I've been playing with oils. All right, we're split between Daniel Smith and my palette. All right, so we're going to do the donuts next. Let's do that one with the unicorn food one since it's just kind of appropriately named and we can do some bright colors. And then for the rest of our paintings, we'll do some Daniel Smith stuff. Okay? So we'll do both. All right, so more than likely yours is going to look nicer than mine. I have been using this a lot lately and have not been cleaning it out. But I need to wet these. If you're using a dry palette, it's always best to give them a good spray or drip some water on each of these and let them soak in for a little bit. It's going to help you get more of the pigment out. It's going to make it more concentrated and just a little easier to work with. So for this one, again, I'll mix it up in here just so that we have them kind of available. Let's do, what color do we want our donuts? I did mine on this one with some pinks and browns and some blues, but we can do whatever colored donuts you guys want. I'll start with a pink just because I think that'll be a fun color, but you guys can put your suggestions in. For the pink one, I'm going to start by washing my brush because it's nice and dirty. Purple and green. Oh, that could be pretty. And then I'm going to start with some of this bubble gum flavor. And I'm going to put a little water in here. So I'm going to do pinks and purples, yes, for this. And then we probably should do like a neutral type color too. So maybe like a vanilla-y yellow. I'm going to put a little more water in there. I'm starting by mixing up the bubble gum. I'm also going to put a little of that watermelon sugar color in there. And let's just test this out and see what color we currently have. You're doing navy? Ooh, that'll be pretty. Okay, so this is a fun color. I'm going to do this as one of my pink colors. Then one thing sometimes I like to do if I want to incorporate a slightly different variation is I can just take a little bit of this same color, so it's kind of based on the same one. I'm going to put a little water in there, and maybe I'll grab one more brush full. So we're kind of starting with the same base, but then let's actually make this a little bit more. We're going to do a purpley one, so let's actually add in a little of this blue raspberry color to turn this more into a purpley color. And let's do a little test just to see how it looks. Ooh, that's a nice lavender type color. I like that. I'm going to keep that one like that because I like how light it is. And then let's do a darker purple one. Putting a little water in there. Then I'm going to put some of this grape jelly in. Did not spray this one very well. I'm really having to swirl around in there because I should have pre-wet these before class, but you know, we're going with it. And let's test this color just to see. I don't think I've added very that. I'm going to add in a little more of that grape jelly color, and then I'm also going to add in a little of that blueberry muffin just because I want it to be kind of a little more towards the blue side just to push it. All right, grabbing a little of that blueberry muffin. I don't want to add in too much. I like to kind of sneak up on colors when I'm mixing them so that they're a little bit easier to not mess up. Okay, so there's I've got one. I think we should do one kind of muted type color. So I'm going to start by mixing up. This is going to kind of be a yellowish brownish color, so I'm kind of thinking like vanilla or like the maple frosting for this one. So let's start with, I'm actually going to start with some of this, I think this one's banana split. Having a little brain fart, but the more yellow ochre type color. And let's actually just take a look at that color. So lightly there. And I didn't wash my brush very well in between, so it's already got a little bit of that muting. I'm going to take a little bit more, just to add in a little more concentration of color. And then I'm going to warm this up. I'm going to add in some of that candy apple color, just a teeny amount, just to warm it up a little bit. This is kind of similar to a red, maybe a red or vermilion color. So sometimes if adding in, one thing I'll do is I'll put the new pigment I'm going to be mixing into my brush, but then I'll actually tap it off just so I can kind of tell. Sometimes you can't always tell how much you have in your brush, and you can kind of tap it off to see. All right, let's test that now. Yes, corn on the cob. So that warmed it up a little bit, but not quite enough. So I'm going to grab some more. Again, I'm going to tap it off. Oh, I think that'll look good with these other colors here. So I think that's how I'm going to do that. So this one in it. Next thing we're going to do is all we need to do is make some blobs with holes in the middle. These do not need to be perfect. So just take your brush, rest it, kind of spread it, and move it around in a bit of a circle. Doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to start with a couple of them of the same color before I wash my brush. The other thing you could do at this time is you could add in a little variation if you wanted to. So if you wanted to take some of this like bubble gum straight from here, you can add in a couple little lines, and depending on how dry it is, you can play with some of the barriers, but you might be able to actually add in kind of some sprinkle type looks there. You can play with that. I don't know if I'm going to do that on many of them, but feel free to experiment. Let's do one more of these here. And then I'm going to switch over to another color. These don't need to be perfect. Let's go into our pink color we mixed up. You know what? Before I move on, I'm wanting some washi tape to give me some nice lines, so I'm going to go ahead and actually put that on. Ooh, I've got some cupcake washi tape. I did pour water on this the other day, so let's see if it still works. But this feels appropriate, right? You know, we're doing donuts. I know it's not a donut, but it is. So I'm putting this on here because one of the things I like about some of these patterns is where it goes off to the edge, and having that nice smooth line is just kind of fun. Gives you a little barrier. You don't have to do this part, but if you want to, it's a little bit fun. So all we're going to do is we're going to just take all those different colors we mixed up, or whatever colors you're doing, and we're just going to make a bunch of blobs. I'm intentionally not going to let any of them touch. I'm going to leave some buffer space in between them, just so that we have room to do some sketching at the very end. If you wanted to play with making them mash together, you can. It'll just make it a little bit harder to kind of sketch in your pieces, but that's totally up to you. So for some of these on the sides, I'm just going to make a little kind of C shape and then kind of close that off a little bit. Again, this is the time where if you wanted to, you could play with, if you wanted to add in some kind of these back runs and add a little texture to these, you could drop in a little water if you wanted to create more texture on them. The more I look at these colors, I'm like really seeing bagels in those colors. Let's add in another one here, another one of the pink. I want one down here too. Oh, of course, you're very, very welcome. All right, now I'm going to grab some of that kind of lavendery color. Again, these do not need to be perfect. Because icing is not perfect. Let's play with this one by taking a little bit of, I'm going to take a little of that blue raspberry and drop in just a little bit to kind of give it a little bit more texture. Again, you don't have to do that. I didn't really do that on this one. I just did that with the pen. So you don't need to, but it can be fun. I'm going to put in some of this darker purple one here. And you could pack in a lot more pigment if you wanted to on these. I like to tend towards on the donuts. I don't know why, but it makes me like, you know, when you eat something that has like way, way, way too much food coloring in it, you can kind of start to taste it. So even though these are pretend donuts, I don't want to give myself the accidental feeling of that sickly sweetness. I know this is not reality, but here we are. All right, I'm just going to add in a couple more of these. Maybe this corner. Here we go. I wish I hadn't put those in such a straight line. Can I fit one in here without it being... Maybe? Which color? I'm going to do a purple. I'm going to try to sneak one in here. Okay. There we go. So, at this point, here's where we are on joining or kind of just tuning in. We're doing a bunch of different abstract paintings today so that we can play. You don't have to do every single one of them if you don't want to, but you can do as many of them as you want. We started with, we're doing some kind of layering that's kind of like almost like a plaid type pattern or a checkered type pattern. So we put this down first and we made it a little bit lighter this way, worked a little darker. We do need this to be dry to move on. So it's pretty much dry, so we actually probably can. We also took that same color. Again, you can switch colors over if you want to. And we made some blobs because we're kind of going to be making something kind of like this. We're learning a couple different skills in each of these. And in this one, we're going to be making some little donuts with some pen outlines in a little bit. So we will let those dry before we add in our pen details again. All right. So I need you guys to let me know. Actually, I'm thinking we should lean into the purple, right? For this one, for our second layer, modify our blue to be a little bit deeper and a little bit more on kind of on the purple side. I'm kind of thinking. What do you guys think? We had purples and blues as a lot of the requests at the beginning of class. Okay, good. So I'm just going to start with the same colors. I've got them here. The first thing I'm going to do is slowly just transfer this all over into here because, I kind of want to do that same thing where I'm going to lighten it and then darken it. Well, let's just get most of that color over here so I'm not wasting it. This is one of the reasons why I like the round brush because it's also like a little sponge. All right, then I'm going to grab a tester strip so that we can see where we're starting with our color. Starting here, it kind of got all mixed together and lightened. And then I think I'm going to start with a little bit of this magenta color. Any sort of a red or pink color, if you're not using the same palette, will work well. I'm going to grab some of that. And I'm not going to be super duper careful because I want quite a bit of this in there. And I'm probably going to have to do this a couple times because there's quite a bit of water in my little well. But you just take a damp brush to grab some of this color. Let's see where we're at so far with the purples. All right, I can tell that I spend way too much time on TikTok because you said gorgeous blue. And in my head, I heard gorgeous, gorgeous girls love gorgeous, gorgeous blue. I'm going to get a little bit more, too, of this magenta here and mix that in because I want it to be a little brighter. Just a little bit. Okay. We're kind of there. I think I'm going to take some of this crimson too. Partially because I don't use it that often, so I know there's a ton of this pigment on here. But it is a pretty color. I don't know why I don't use it that often. So I'm going to take some of this crimson color. This is what it looks like kind of on its own. And let's mix it in. Now this has got a slightly different tone to it, so it is going to really change this color. And I'm probably going to want to add in a little more blue because it's way redder. And so yeah, it does kind of mute it because I had a bit of that blue has a very slight green tint to it, so you're going to not only get more red, but you're also going to get a little more muting. What is the thing where you are trained paint from? I don't. This is the Viviva color sheets. This is where I'm getting the paint from, and then this is a little mixing well. You can buy these at Michael's for like $2. So I'm going to take a little more of that Persian blue and put that in. I want mine to not be quite so red, so I'm just going to do that. And then this is a little tester strip. I kind of like that color. I might stay with that color. I feel like this looks more purple in person than it does on the camera, but I can never quite tell how you guys can see the colors. So, all right, we're going to start with it a lot lighter. So I'm going to be a little bit better this time. So I did use a flat brush on the first layer, so I am going to switch back to that. And let's mix this in so we get a light diluted color. And we're going to start with a nice light color here. I'm going to grab my flat brush. And again, if you have a preferred way to move your hand, move your paper in order to make it easier. So for me, making horizontal stripes is easier. So in order to make this a crisscross pattern, I'm going to flip this so it's going to be easier. And you want to start with your light color. I'm trying to concentrate all my color kind of down on one end. So I'm going to start at the top where it's technically lighter over here. And then I'm going to move down towards the darkest part. So the sprayer thing is just a spray bottle. Just a normal spray bottle. All right, so we're working on our brush control too here. So we want to make nice, even lines. Like that. And we're going to darken this. Oh, I might have done that way not on screen, sorry. I'm going to take 2 brushfuls here, darken it a little bit into our lighter color. Then we want to not have these lines touch. The other thing you can play with here is the lighter you can touch this, the more it's just going to lay it on top of the previous layer and not drag the other colors from underneath it with it. If you don't like the blooms, make sure you suck them up before they sit for too long. I don't mind them, so I'm just going to keep them there. Want to be light. Adding in another brushful. Trying to be light. Oops. See, this is interfering with my ability to... I like to kind of run my hand along the side of my desk, which gives me a little more stability. So I'm going to have to move my little mixing well off so that I can have a better shot of doing that. I want to be light. Just adding in a brushful at a time. The other thing that's impeding my ability is this little clip, so let's take that off. There we go, that feels better. And notice how different the color looks where it's on the white paper versus where it crosses over different colors. Depending on the color you're using, you're going to have different amounts of that effect. And this is a little bit too much of that, so I'm going to take a little bit of that. I like some of it, but that was a little bit much. Practicing our brush control. Practicing changing this color a little bit. Practicing layering. And you could stop it here, or if you want it to run off a little bit, you can do that there too. Take a little bit of that. We're also seeing in this one how much those different blooming effects happen and things like that. So we just want to let that sit and dry. And this will actually be the end of this one here. If you can hear that banging, it's actually a very cute thing. My dog is laying on the floor upstairs, and I think she's being pet, so she's happy. So she's got a big tail. It's just banging on there. All right, now I am a little worried. I'm going to set this off to the side, and I don't have very much working space, and it's going to be a little off kilter, so I am going to suck up a little bit of this. I don't mind the blooms, but I'm afraid it's going to run everywhere. Just kind of to make it so I don't make a big mess. All right, I quite like how this one turned out. I like how the blooms are a little bit uneven. It adds a little more chaos to kind of this structured type look of this, and I like that. Oh, that's so exciting. Okay, so on this one, we're going to layer another color in here, and we can use that same purple if we want to. We probably should use some of it. The other thing is, if you're using something like the Viviva colors and all of a sudden you want to switch over, you can mix different palettes together. It's totally fine. So, but let's just take some of this purple color and let's see, what does our purple look like? A more diluted purple. That could look nice with that. Maybe even lighter. I'm going to add in a little bit more water to it just to kind of thin it down a little bit. Maybe just a little more. Looks like jellyfish. Oh, I could totally see that. Yeah, you know those blob paintings, you could pretty much do that with anything that you can think of. Like we could make a bunch of blobs and then turn them into jellyfish. That could be kind of fun. But on this one, what we're doing is we're doing some layering. We're also learning a little bit about the blooming effects. You're also going to get different effects on blooming depending on the colors you're using, even within a single set, because some are going to be more granulating than others. And on this one, what we want to do is we want some areas to overlap and some areas to not. So I'm just going to make some more blobs. Don't overthink it too much. Now the Viviva sheets are going to run a little bit more, but that can be super beautiful. Like, I want this to be a little more irregular shaped. Look at this part. I love this part here. Where that border blue, where it kind of all fell in, it's just slightly bleeding into the other one. I love that. Then I am going to encourage some more texture, so I let that soak in for a second while I was looking at that blue. Wash my brush, and it's just a little damp, and I'm just going to tap it in just to get some more texture into this. And then let's do another one here. We're going to get that bleeding from both sides. Yes, please. Normally, I don't know how much I would like this, but in the abstract, oh my goodness, I love it so much. Although it could be look really cool to soften the edges and things. We'll have to wait and see how it dries too, because it's going to change it a lot. Let's put a big old drop for this one. And then I'm going to do one more over here. One more blob. And maybe this one's not going to touch any of them. This one's going to stand alone. But let's do another drop in this one too, a big one. This is going to kind of push a lot of that to the sides. And then if you don't want it to keep kind of running, you can suck up some of that extra water here. I'm going to leave it like that. Yes, I can totally see the cells through a microscope. Okay, so let's take stock of where we're at. I think at this point we're actually going to need to start another one. And I lost track of what you guys were wanting to do at the beginning. I think I picked a couple of them. Let's revisit some of these. All right, so I'm going to do this in a Hold on, let me write down some numbers so that you guys can actually choose. Because it was definitely a little more unclear last time. So I'm going to set this to this side. All right, number 1 as an option. This one we're going to encourage some bleeding. We're going to try to have some separation. Number 2 doesn't have to look exactly like this, but the idea is to block out some color in a wet on wet way, and then we can make sense of it later. Find some more examples. Where are you? Examples. I have too big of a stack over here. Number 3 is some real, just wet on wet ones here. And let me give you one more option as well. Okay, so we could do, this is a slight difference on the other one, but if you were inspired by the microscope one, number 4, we could actually intentionally kind of make it look like a slide under a microscope. All right, let me look. I'm gonna, yeah. Oh goodness. Got 2, 3. We definitely have a lot for 3. Okay. This is a definite one. We've got quite a few for 2. All right. And we've got a couple for 1. So we will probably do all 3 of these. You know what? Because guess what? I have 3 pieces of paper taped down here. So it's your lucky day. I don't know if it's your lucky day. I probably would have done it anyways. All right, so on these ones, we're going to switch over. On these ones, I'm going to do it with Daniel Smith because that was the other requested palette. So let me grab that. Ooh, there we go. And let's see. By the way, I got this idea from Christy the Painter to get old tins from like a flea market. And I filled this up with, these have got some of my Daniel Smith paints. I also have some of the Burgette pigments in here too. And some Dreamland calligraphy. But then I put little magnets on them so they stick in here. We will finish the donuts. I'm waiting for mine. Mine are almost dry. I think after I do the first layer on this next painting, we'll be able to finish them off. Okay, so the Daniel Smith colors that I have this is like a metallic one. I think this is Gambage, and then this is yellow green, a phthalo blue. This is a quinacridone purple, and then this is a quinacridone magenta. And on this one, rather than mixing up my colors, I am just going to wet these. And we're going to be mixing just straight on here. So I'm going to do it on this one here. And you've got a couple different ways you can wet this. We don't need to be super careful on this one. We can just take a brush, and you could use a round brush to go over everything, or if we want to speed this up, this is when a flat brush does come in quite handy. But we want to wet the whole thing. Get it nice and wet, nice and evenly wet. And let's just check to make sure it is nice and evenly wet. Check the reflections if you see any areas that are not wet. Put a little more water on there. And then I'm going to be dipping straight into these colors that I have. I don't have too many Daniel Smith paints, but some of these are quite spectacular. Then all we're going to do is we just get to play. While it's wet, just place that pigment down and drag it and watch it spread. And I like to kind of do mine at like an angle and come down with a few different shapes. Then I also like to vary the concentration of this by washing my brush and kind of encouraging there to be some water in some of these areas. maybe even taking some of that pigment with me. So this is just going to be a real free-flowing one where we're just being super loose. We're putting this all into on wet paper. Let's carve out some yellow here so that we have some really bright colors while this is still wet. Let's put a little here. I'm going to tap in some areas. And we're going to do a little layering on this, even though, I mean, you don't have to, but I'm going to do a little layering on it so that you can see. Yeah, this yellow is a nice yellow. It's kind of golden almost. And then I'm going to put a little of this quinacridone magenta in a few areas, and I'm going to be a little intentional to not have it mix in super weird ways, or at least try. And I think I've got a little bit too much in my brush, so let me tap a little of that out. Tap it in here. This is going to kind of be my highlight color, so I don't want to put too much in. We can always add in more. Washing my brush, tapping it. Let's actually put a couple drops of water on this. Down. Let's drop some water. And there. I'm going to leave that like that. This is probably not how I'm going to completely leave this painting, but this is kind of my first layer. And we can do a lot with a little more depth, but we're going to start there. So I'm going to set that to the side. Now we're going to finish the donuts because mine are dry enough to do that. In case this is your first class with me, I know I jump around a lot, but my idea is to be able to show you guys a whole bunch of stuff at once. And it also allows things to dry so I don't have to use the hairdryer on live. I want to grab a black pen. These are two of the pens that I commonly use. This is just a black Papermate felt tip pen. And then this is another one that I bought on Amazon. I like this one. It's not as dark as the other one, but it has a little bit nicer tip to it. So you could use either something like one of these. You could technically use a ballpoint pen or whatever you have is going to be just fine. So let me put these down so you can kind of see what we're working towards. You can see them a little bit. All we're going to start by doing is outlining our little iced bits. So just outline your iced bits here. You can emphasize some of the drips if you want to. But outline one here. And then what we want to do is when we're looking at the donuts, oops, this one actually needs a little thing here. I missed one. Is we're going to examine them. So when we're looking at them, none of them are going to be straight on, or we would just see these regular circles. We kind of want them to be at a little bit of an angle. So whatever side you choose the more the breading to be showing, inside your little donut hole, the opposite side is going to kind of allude to the fact that that's where some of that breading is there. So on this one, I think I'm going to have my breading be kind of over here. This is the part of the donut that's exposed, which means that taking on the opposite side of that donut hole, that's where we want to hint to it having a bit of that shape. This is also the time if you wanted to, on some of mine, this is where I added in a little texture just by adding in some different little lines to make the little sprinkles. Make them go in different directions. You don't have to do that part. Let's add in the rest of these here. The other thing I like to do a little bit is kind of balance. I mean, you can do them all, so like pretending like they were all sitting in the same plane and we're all looking at them at the same direction, so all of your breading parts could be on this side. But I personally like to make it look like they're kind of all floating in slightly different directions. I don't know why, but that's just what I like. So that is what I'm going to do. All right, starting with outlining the frosting. Our little donut frostings here. Decide side for the breading. Then on the opposite side on the inside, you're going to kind of fill that in so that you can see the inner part of that donut exposed. Yes. Oh, let's actually, I'm going to switch over to the other one so you can see the difference between these two, because this one does have a finer tip, but this one is also darker so that you can see it. Again, outlining the frosting first. Opposite side. And if we wanted to add in some more of those sprinkle type shapes. I'm going to bring this up a little bit closer just so you can see the difference between those two pens. This one's darker and a little bit thicker, but this one you can get a little more precision with. So you could actually play with a little bit of both on these. This could be a good opportunity too for you to test out your different pens. Try a couple different ones on different donuts just to see what you like better. It always amazes me how much a little pen detail does to take these little ovals into something kind of very real. Now I want a donut. I probably will not have a donut today because I made Christmas cookies and that's what I had for breakfast, so I probably need some vegetables. I love Christmas cookies. Oh my goodness, the second day after you've frosted them, when the frosting is just kind of soaked in and the cookie is still soft, it's my favorite thing. So the brand paper I'm using, we've actually got a couple things going on here. This is Canson XL, and it is 140 pound. Let me find my little, you can see what it looks like. I have it somewhere. Here we go. This is kind of my recommended baseline for beginner type stuff. But I also do use, if you use a ton of paper, this one from Michaels is cheaper. It's 140 pound as well. And this is what I use for a lot of my tutorials and things because I go through so much paper that it would be really expensive for me to buy super duper nice paper. And this works pretty well. So a lot of the other ones we're doing actually are on this as well. I'm going to add a little more. I'm adding some sprinkles. I swear, I feel like my mouth is watering thinking about donuts right now. You're going to get the artist laugh. Yeah, no, it's good. I use it all the time. It works pretty well. And it will really help you. Yeah, if you haven't been working on watercolor paper, you're going to see a big difference in how the paints move. And some of those things where you're like, why can't I get mine to do that? It might just be because you're using a very different paper than whoever you're watching do something. A lot of watercolor teachers, I kind of count myself in this, but kind of not, will say that if you have a budget to buy your watercolor supplies, that you want to spend the majority of it on paper. And I kind of agree with that. because the nicer your paper, the better it's going to be. But I also kind of don't agree with that, because most of the time when they're talking about that, they're kind of saying like you have to have arches or some sort of 100% cotton paper. And while those are super nice, I like them a lot, they're really pricey, and they make it so that you feel like, oh, I cannot use this to paint until I really know how to paint, or it has to be spectacular, and there's all this pressure for you to actually do it, you know? Reduce as many barriers as you can. Even sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to use my Arches paper, and then I think, but is it going to be good? I'm not going to do it. It's so expensive. I don't want to ruin it. And I'd rather just enjoy painting. So there we go. Recommendation for beginners watercolor paint. So my biased recommendation is my palette that has all these bright colors, and then it comes with a little mixing well. But I also hesitate to recommend anything specifically because I don't know what your budget is. I don't know kind of what you're working with there. So one of the good ones that I have found that's under $10 is the Prang. Prang watercolors are pretty decent. If you're like, I don't know if I'm going to like this and I just want to get started, that's also a really good one. Most watercolor palettes are going to be okay to get started with. So. All right, I'm going to take these off because I just want to see the borders. Yeah, and then my set is right around that $20 range. But yeah, if you wanted to spend less, then I would go with the Prang ones over, personally, so there are some good Crayola ones, but you have to make sure you don't get the washable ones. I don't like how the washable ones work at all. And those are usually the most readily available ones. You have to like really seek out the ones that are not washable. So if you were in a store with $10 to spend, you're staring at Prang or Crayola, go for the Prang. Not only that, but it came with a pretty decent brush. Big kid set you found at Sam's Club. That's fun. So mine is called the Unicorn Food Palette, and it's got all these different colors in it, and then it comes with a little thing that actually shows you how to do color mixing and things like that. Mine does not include a black, a white, or a brown intentionally to kind of, not because I don't think anybody should use those, you can totally, but it's going to force you to learn how to mix them. And that's going to set you up for success. And then you'll also know, okay, I use a ton of brown, so maybe in my next set I do want to buy brown or something like that. All right, I'm going to take the tapes off of this one too. So I like Master's Touch acrylic paints, but I'm not a big fan of their watercolors. I mean, whatever you have is totally fine. It's all personal preference. So, okay, so somebody has the professional Winsor & Newton ones. They're not the professional grade ones, but I think they're artist grade, and they're nice, but they're not my favorites. Like, I usually only reach for them during class because that's typically what other people have if I want to demonstrate on another palette. But they're not, like, I probably would not recommend those. Not that they're bad, just not my preference. So here are these two ones here. Oh, Koi, yes, absolutely. I have Koi. Their dried pans are great. Their tubes are terrible. Okay, so here are these two. We finished these two up. I really like both of these. I also like, in my sketchbook, I like these two colors next to each other. Yeah, if you're thinking about getting a Koi one, those would work really well too. So yes, for those of you who are on and you have my palette, you can see I use my palette way more than anything else. I do really like them, but I do try to keep this as unbiased as possible because I don't want anybody who's watching who either can't get mine because of budget or if you're in another country or something like that. I don't want you to feel like you can't watch these lives because I want everybody to be able to come and enjoy class. So Winsor & Newton is, I mean, it's a brand that a lot of people like. They're just not my preference. And that's just going to be different. Different people are going to have different preferences for different things. So let's see. All right. I think I've answered most of your questions there. We need to add another layer onto this. I'm kind of feeling like a yellow type color. What do you guys feel about that? Kind of a nice bright yellow. Thoughts? And also, would you like me to layer a different palette on top? These started as the koi ones here. All of yours are still wet. Oh, green would be pretty. Yeah, let's do like a muted green on these. Yes, yes, yes. Also, I did not realize we're already at 12:15, so I don't know if we will be doing all of the ones, and I will have to play with this one a little bit more. I want to show you the Daniel Smith just so you can see kind of the difference in some of it. But let's start by mixing up kind of a greenish color. Yes. So what happened to the single purple? It got blue. Because I mixed that color up, sometimes this happens with different colors. So that's a really interesting thing to notice here. Even though this technically was just purple, and these ones were purple over the blues, this one has some blue in it. That can happen sometimes with colors where when they start to dry, sometimes the pigments from different colors settle out. This is one of the really reasons why coming and playing with your watercolor and experimenting is going to really help you down the road because you're going to start to see some things like this, and they might be different in different sets. So that's a really good observation to make, and it's also a really good thing to know about maybe the limitations or the special abilities that your watercolor has. Yes, this golden tone would look amazing too. Okay, so, ooh, I am torn. I kind of want the golden tone, but I also like the idea of the green. All right, take a vote between the golden tone and green, because I'm like 50-50 split. Got a couple greens. There's also a question, ooh, and a bunch more golds. Oh no, this is so split. All right, let's, you know what? Yeah, you guys are split. I'm going to do the golden tone. Oh, no, wait. I'm going to do the green tone, but I'm going to drop some of the golden tone into it. You voted a few times. All right. So, I need a little more paper towel. Mine is soaked. Does anybody else ever look at your paper towel when you're done and think, oh, that's pretty, I should frame that? All right, let's mix up a greenish color. I'm going to soak up some of this purple here. I'll use this well. Again, I'm moving back towards the Viva ones because that's what we've been using on this, so might as well keep most of it. This is from the Unicorn Food palette, so we'll also get to see a little bit of how the two different colors play together. And let's mix up kind of a green. All right, starting with some fresh water in there. I'm going to start with some of this light green, but it's super duper vibrant. This color in here, I I want to show you guys one thing. One of the powers of watercolor, and also one thing you need to be careful with in the Viviva ones, is if you're like, oh, light green, and you go to take a bunch of this, well, that doesn't look very light, does it? No, but if you were to have taken a lot less, or you thin this out, look how bright and vibrant that green actually gets. So using less of this one can sometimes be way, way more. Okay. All right, so there's a question about when my next class is, and I have an answer and I also don't have an answer. So if somebody has access to a calendar, what day does New Year's fall on, by the way? Okay, sap green, I'm going to take some of this, and New Year's Eve. What do those days fall on? So I'm mixing up a combo of that sap green and the light green. Okay, so yeah, that is, because I'm trying to give myself the holidays off, because I've pretty much worked 7 days a week for the last 6 months or something. So I'm trying to give but I'm going to skip next week's class for sure. I know that. But I want to do a class the week after, but I don't want to do it on the holiday. Partially because you guys are probably going to be doing fun things, and also I want to just not be doing anything where I'm responsible for anything. So what do you guys think? Would you like to do like a Friday class or a Sunday class instead? Thoughts? All right, I'm taking a little more of this light green, and then I'm going to put a little blue into this green color. I'm actually going to use the Viridian blue. A Sunday class would be good? Okay. I'm going to tentatively say, yeah, it'll probably be around the same time, that 11 a.m. Mountain Time. That seems to work pretty well for most people. We can even get some of the people from Europe, because it's still not way too late. All right, I'm kind of thinking a Sunday. All right, so I've got this golden color. Let's also just double check this golden color to make sure it's going to be dark enough. All right, yes, that'll be nice. I'm going to start, since this is already my brush, by making at least one blob here with this one. And remember, this is the one that's that unicorn food palette. And then I'm going to take some of this green, and let's just drop this in here. Oh, yeah. Okay, this was a good idea. I like this a lot. See, when we work together, we make beautiful things. I'm going to put the green down over here. Goodness, if you could actually see my working surface, it is laughably messy right now. Oh, I'm leaving that one like that. Look at that. Yes, that is beautiful. With that blue bleeding into it. You had to order my palette. Oh, thank you. And let's do another one here. Green, blue, I don't know. Indecision. You can always tell when I start to concentrate on something because I start to whisper. All right. I'm going to take some of this yellow and pop that in. Let's pop it in around the edge here and in a couple areas. Oh, I really like this one. Okay, I'm leaving this as it is because I like the balance of how this is. It's going to look really neat when I do add this final thing in, the pen detail, but I'm going to leave this one here. We are starting to run close to time, so I'm going to put another layer on that Daniel Smith one so you can see it, and then ideally that one will be dry enough where I can at least work around the wet parts to add in that final detail. Okay, So I'm going to grab those Daniel Smith colors again. Where are they on my desk? Here we go. Oh, somebody asked me about my work surface, what this is. This is an IKEA adjustable crank desk that has a nice big flat thing, and then I just put some contact paper over it to make it be a fun background. Also, I was always worried because it came with such a nice white background. I always felt really worried about making it dirty, so I like to have it covered so that I don't have to feel that guilt, you know? Alright, so this is where this one ended last time, and I'm going to start again by wetting it. When you're wetting over a layer that has a bunch of colors like this, you want to lay the brush just on top, and you want to be pretty gentle about how you're doing this, because if you try to really drag this across, you're going to start to see some of those lines in there, and it's going to take some of that pigment with it, so you want to really just lay it across. I'm going to start to concentrate more and more of this blue color here. And this is a beautiful granulating type blue color. You can see it really separating in some of those areas. I'm just going to kind of try to better define some of these areas. I want more contrast. Let's cover this area up here. Okay, so I am tempted to do one other thing here. That isn't a Daniel Smith color, but I just think could be really... Yeah, the red definitely faded out, so let's put a little more in there just to see if we can get a little more of that going. I've got Moogie hair in my brush. There we go. And this one, we're just playing. Just play. Have a bit of fun. Alright, I don't know how well this is going to work, but this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to wet... You see a cowboy with long legs? It's like cloud gazing. No, I think this one. I want to drop some metallic in this just to see what happens while it's wet. Ooh, I'm going to bring this up closer so you guys can see. So this is super duper duper wet. Let's... Yep, I feel like this is what this needed, was a little bit of this metallic. This is probably a little bit too wet, how I'm working in this now, but, you know, this is our playtime. I'm going to try to get a little bit of this out. Oh, look at how that gold is settling into some of the texture on the paper. Oh, I like that. Alright, so this one turned out to be a disaster, but it was fun to play with. Alright, yeah. This is my failure for the day for sure, but I had fun doing it, and so let's not call it a failure. Let's call it playtime. Alright, the finishing touch we're going to do to this one here is we're going to add that, somebody called it like a DNA strand type thing. This is, you've probably seen this demonstrated on TikTok or on YouTube or something like that. I don't remember where this all started, but it's just kind of a fun little sketching technique. And I do need to be careful not to put this anywhere where this color I just added is, because that's not dry yet. So I'm going to wind mine kind of going like this All you're going to start by doing is making little dots, and you want to vary how far apart they are from each other in the direction. We're just going to make a little path with these little dots. Does anybody know who the original creator of this little design is? Out of curiosity? And then all we're going to do is we're just going to connect these. I got to be a little careful about where I place my hand in order to do this because of the wet parts. We're just going to connect the two dots with a few little lines that you kind of arch outwards. And each one you can do a little bit different or have more or less of those lines. So you could do one that has 4. This next one I could do 6. So 3 on each side. Let's actually make this one into 8. Let's make it a real boobler. There we go. And then let's do this one with a couple. Maybe that one just goes off with 1. Change the direction. We're meeting these with little arches. Maybe I'll keep this one a little simpler. Oh, I could totally see this as cocoa pods. Yes. Yeah, I can see that. I hadn't seen that before. That is kind of the fun thing, yeah, about abstract art. It is like cloud gazing, you know? Everybody's going to see a little something else, but when they point it out, you might be able to see it too. I want this one to be really prominent. Okay. One other thing I want to show you, because I was doing a little experimentation on this. I was working on a project where this came in handy. I don't have the project ready to show, but one other technique I came across on how to modify how a layer looks is by actually using some sandpaper. I'm going to show you this in a second before we get off our call, because we are, or call, our live. Oh my goodness. Like this is like a call. Oh my goodness. All right. I'm losing my mind. Let's just bring this one off with just a couple. Just kind of weave it in between. I really like how this one turned out. I do think that worked well. Anyways, I've got, I had a piece over here that I was going to demonstrate on as our final little thing. Okay. If you wanted to, I think this would work really well in like some parts of landscapes or something, is let's say you've got some color here, but you wanted to make it a little more textured or something after the fact. Once it's dry, you can take some sandpaper, or this is a little like nail sanding block, and you can sand your paper. And this is probably an awful sound, I'm sorry. But it will expose a little bit of the paper underneath, and it will give it kind of a different texture and a different look. So if you're looking for something new to play with, or let's say one of these did not turn out super duper well, let it dry and then maybe play with adding some sandpaper texturing in there so you can see how that works and what it looks like after today. So let's just do a little recap of what we've got today. The main ones we finished were, we got some cute little donuts, we got this fun plaid type square here, and then we did this one here. So I will at some point make a little announcement or schedule something for within the next couple weeks. It just won't be on any of the holidays. And if anybody is celebrating any of the holidays, I hope that you have a really lovely time doing whatever your favorite traditions are. Other than that, that's pretty much the end of today. If you do want to send me pictures, the best way to do that is through Instagram. And I hope everybody has a lovely day, and thank you so much for joining me today.